Thank you, Linda, Kelly, and Wendy for having me here today. I was hoping there'd be a microphone because I'm losing my voice, but can you all hear me okay? All right, great. Does everyone have a coffee bean from me? Okay. Oh, you have it? Okay. Anyone not have a coffee bean? Okay. I'll give you one. So I'm intentionally giving this to each of you one at a time by hand because this is part of what I want to share with you, which is about coffee. And when people ask me all the time, which they do a lot, especially these days, why do I care so much about coffee? It is absolutely about coffee, right? Because we all love coffee. But actually, it's not really about the coffee on a deeper level. Cesar Chavez said, it's never a fight about the grapes. It's a fight about the people. And so my talk today will share this with you and share some of the women who I've met along the way in coffee. So I think actually I'll pass this around because when, again, people ask me how this all started, it started with the scent of coffee, not as coffee beans, but as a drink. And so I'll pass this around. What I gave you all was a bean, just half of a bean. I'll show you some pictures of a whole bean from Ethiopia that was roasted in Maine by Bard Coffee. And I think when most of us think about coffee, we think about it as a drink, right? Like even today we have, this box of coffee. But I'm going to complicate this a little bit. So I'm going to go backwards. I was going to actually start with a poem, but I'm going to end with a poem instead. So let's see if this works. Great. Okay. So did you know last week was National Coffee Day? And then there was International Coffee Day, of course, because we're in Washington State in the Seattle region, right, which has the best coffee in the U.S. So, of course, we love our coffee. And the theme today is waves of possibility. And when Kelly and I were talking about the theme, of course, as a Californian, I love this theme of waves, right? And so this is, one of the things about history is there's always waves for everything, right? There's three waves of religion. There's 3 waves of feminism. Did you know there's 3 waves of coffee? And ostensibly, we're in the 4th wave now, depending on how you date these things. And we really don't need to be scientific about it at all. But just to give you a quick overview, it's not so precise when the wave began or ended, right? But in theory, the first wave could have been when coffee first started to be roasted and came to America, which we would now think of, who's still roasting, is Folgers and Maxwell House, right? And so everything, if you think about the first wave, that was before 1960, right? Without any thought of future waves. This is all in retrospect. So then the second wave, if you think about it as waves, that's definitely going to be Starbucks and Peet's coming in the 1960s. And what both of those coffee companies do, of course, is they introduce coffee to an entirely new generation of people. And the cafe as a cultural, I would say, icon now in America, whereas Europe, of course, has had the cafe for a very long time. But it wasn't something that we had in America really before the 1960s. We would have coffee shops, right? You would go on the roadside and you could just get a cup of Joe. But it wouldn't be like now, where you have the beautiful couches and you sit and you meet with your friends and have coffee, right? And then maybe if we look at it as a third wave, that's where you have this focus on what is great quality coffee and the ethics and the sustainability of the coffee trade. And that really starts to gear up in the 1980s in particular. And Seattle, again, is a really great place where this is happening, was and still is, in terms of the art of coffee. These artisan beans. So these beans that you have now are absolutely 3rd, 4th wave coffee beans because of the care of the quality of the art of the roasting and everything about the process, which we'll talk a little bit about. So maybe we're in the 4th wave. It's a little bit debatable. But part of, where I'm seeing a shift, is in this sense of, what makes coffee great in terms of the art. But it's so interesting to me to see that all these coffee conferences I go to, the word resilience is coming up over and over in these discussions in the coffee industry, in specialty coffee. So I know this audience more than any other, right, knows what the definition of resilience is, right? So could somebody give my voice a break and tell me, what is resilience? How do we define resilience? Wendy, can I pick on you?
Well, I think of it as the ability for an organization to adapt to changing situations, changing impacts that might impact that organization in such a way that they can adapt to the next change that's coming. The wave of change. So organizations adapting.
Yeah, great. Survival. Great. Okay. Any other ways that you define this?
I think in my organization, because they have to put things in a way I will understand. So being able to think of it in that context, you can easily apply it to a lot of different situations.
Yeah, great. Anybody else?
I guess you could say it's adapting to a new normal every time.
Yeah. So I love, in so much of these answers, there's a metaphor embedded in it, especially with this idea of the willow branch, right? And, fundamentally, I love words. I teach English, I teach writing, I teach poetry, and one of my favorite things in the whole world is the Oxford English Dictionary. If you look at that, you can trace where each word first was ever used in its history. It's such a wonderful dictionary. And then you can trace the etymology of words. And so I don't know if you've ever thought about the word resilience in this way before, but it comes from the Latin root salere, which, does anyone know Latin? It means to jump. So, of course, in English, we know you put the re in front of a word, right? And so literally it means to jump back. So we think about resilience as to bounce back, right, from a disaster, whether it's man-made or from climate change or terrorism, right? And we think about what does it take to be resilient in our communities, in our cities, in our government. And I spend a lot of time in the program that we have out of Boston thinking about what this looks like in the context of security, right? Security and Resilience Studies is our program's name. One of my favorite things about this word resilience, though, in the Latin root is that it actually, when you go way, way back, it has the image of pirates. And so pirates would actually salire from one ship to another. Why? To capture the treasure, right? And of course, you have to have firm footing if you're a pirate, right? Going from one boat to another, to be able to jump over the sea and the sharks and whatever else is treacherous there, right? To get the treasure. And so, embedded in that word is that idea of jumping for a cause, for something you want, for a better life, right? So we love that word, right? Sustainability, okay, or rather resilience. Here's another word we all love, right? And it goes with resilience, and that's sustainability. So let me ask you the same question. How do you define sustainability?
Keep going, to keep it up.
Other ideas? Linda?
For me, sustainability, whether it is personally or organizationally or community-wise, it is keep it up, but it's the ability to think and structure and be able to look at the future and the past and help determine what we need in order to stay moving forward, whether it's how much food, how much oxygen, et cetera, but all of those kinds of things we need to take into account for ourselves and for others in order to sustain us and to sustain our families and to keep moving forward and being healthy.
Mm-hmm. Great. Anyone else? So sustainability, if you go back to the OED, originally was the quality of being sustainable by argument. It was a legal term and how it was first used. So we think about the capacity to be able to uphold an argument, right, in court, to something to be defended as valid or correct or true. So that's the original usage. Over time, this word, it's something that it's almost synonymous sometimes with climate change, right? Where we think about this earth that we, call home, and we think about the people who, we share this planet with, and what is this future like, right? What kind of, are we living in a sustainable way right now? No, right? Will it be able to be sustained for the future? No, right? So, what I'm doing is thinking about this in terms of the coffee trade. But again, I just love this word because when you look at the Latin of how this word came to be, it's coming from these two sub, which is under, right? Or teneo. And does anyone know the verb tener? Yeah, to hold. To hold. So when we think about sustaining, it quite literally means to hold. To have something, like I gave you the bean, right? This is why I did this, is I put it in your hand, you're now holding it. When I hold my cup of coffee, I'm holding this thing, right, that I know is a drink, but as we go through, you'll see how fun this gets. So, when I think about sustainability, I think about it in these two ways. I think about these things literally based on the word, right, and the usage, of course. But I think about it in terms of the earth, and I think about it in terms of people. And they're not, of course, they go together, right? And this little girl, so a lot of the pictures from my presentation today come from my July trip where I was in Rwanda and Kenya. And it was my second trip to Kenya, but my first to Rwanda. And so most of them will be from Rwanda. And this little girl is about 1 year old, and what I was so happy to capture this picture because what's behind her are coffee trees that are also about a year old. And so I love this image for me where I think about what's the future of coffee? It's in trouble. What's the future of, our next generation? Unfortunately, we might see it the same way, right? And so, to the extent that we can hold up each other and the earth with more strength, right, and more resilience, we'll all be stronger together. So now I get to the great question of what is coffee? This is interactive.
A stimulant.
A liquid.
Wait, stimulant?
It is a liquid as well.
A liquid? Okay.
It's a plant.
A plant? Yeah.
Energy.
Of course, right? The elixir of life, right? Yeah, it's all those things, of course, right? And it's a fact. Most Americans and most Europeans, we know our coffee as a liquid. We actually purchase our coffee in cafes and other places much more than we even brew it at home. For the few of us who do brew at home, right? And even those of us who do, we still buy it outside the home too, right? In the U.S., it's somewhere around a $48 billion industry right now. So I'm going to show you some great pictures, okay? If you didn't know I was talking to you about coffee, would you think that was coffee? Yeah. Yeah. So I love this. These are some Rwandan coffee. So these are coffee, Rwandan coffee cherries, what I call the rainbow coffee. Some of this is ripe and some is not ripe. Coffee trees really need shade, and we're not going to get into too much of what I'm thinking about in terms of the politics of the global trade and some of the policies around the world that are absolutely not effective, especially for small farmers. But one of them is this whole issue of shade grown the need that coffee has for shade. And there's been different times in history where governments have come in and said, no, cut down the banana trees, which is the worst thing you could do, because actually it needs the banana trees for the shade. So I took this picture while I was sitting, you'll see in a little bit, at a farmer's school. I was looking up in this, beautiful Rwandan sky and saw the banana leaves and the coffee on the trees, and so that's coffee. They're very, very tall trees if they're healthy and taken. Coffee trees need a lot of love, so if they're well cared for, they'll be very tall. Here's a bunch of unripe coffee cherries. To me, it looks almost like wine, right? Like grapes. Did you know coffee was a flower? Coffee cherries, all these are ripe. So there's lots of different ways to process coffee, and again, not the focus of today, but just to show you a couple pictures, as this is a depulper where the cherry it's one way for the cherry to go through it, and this is what I really wanted to show you, is inside that cherry is the bean, and what I gave each of you is half of that whole bean. And so what has to happen, and this is part of what's so complicated, and also has so much to do about the quality of coffee, is how that mucilage around the coffee bean is taken off, affects the quality, and how fast that happens, because coffee cherries ferment the second they're picked from a tree. So, I'm, of course, showing you so many pictures of hands, right, because of this idea of sustainability and all of the hands that touch our coffee beans before it ever gets to us here in America. This is some coffee, we would call this parchment. So this is after it's gone through the depulper, and it can look like this. And here's an example of some gorgeous parchment. It's almost white, like ivory. And this is perfectly picked, high quality specialty coffee. And then it's going to go through a bunch of other steps that I'm leaving out. And then eventually someone will roast it. And then it will become this brown bean, like I shared with you. And then it becomes the drink in all kinds of different forms, right? So a couple years ago on International Coffee Day, USAID gave another huge grant to Rwanda to help instigate some more work in the coffee industry. And they made a statement here that coffee is more than a popular beverage consumed by 1/3 of the world's population. It's a key source of income for 25 million farmer families in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Coffee production also drives demand for farm labor, benefiting resource-poor rural families and communities around the world. Now, the numbers are really slippery in coffee. The 25 million is probably really quite low, especially when you think about how many people are in a household and how many people are benefiting from the coffee trade. So some numbers will say it's a lot more, like 125 million families are sustained or not by coffee. So here's just a point of comparison. So I've been talking a lot about quality in coffee, and that's really coming from this fourth wave that I've been also sharing with you about specialty coffee. And that's not where actually the majority of the beans are traded from, though. The majority of the beans are traded in the commercial industry. So we're back to Folgers and Maxwell House and some of these other huge corporations that own upwards 60% of the world's beans and are moving the beans in different ways. But I wanted to show you, remember that gorgeous picture of the white parchment coffee a few minutes ago? Here is commercial coffee. So you can even see, right, that this is inferior to that finely picked specialty parchment coffee. So the future of coffee is definitely a challenge. And a lot of this has to do with because of so many climate-related diseases that are, they're coffee diseases, but climate change is making them worse, okay? So just to share a couple of these with you. One is leaf rust. This is wiping out hundreds and hundreds of thousands of acres of coffee around the world. mostly in Latin America. It's called La Roya. In this slide, can you see those little holes that are in the branch? All of those holes were the result of one tiny worm that got into that branch and then made that mark of all those other holes and basically ruined the entire tree. And again, there's a lot of bugs and a lot of coffee-related bugs, beetles, who are really negatively affecting coffee harvests. Then there's a lot of climate disasters, right? We just had, well, not we, right? But we witnessed Hurricane Matthew. So I was thinking a lot about Cuba and Jamaica as coffee-dependent countries. This hurricane, can you see Puerto Rico in the lines there? Right here. So this was Hurricane George from 1998, which in one day wiped out 90% of the banana crops, and I think it's 70% of the coffee crops in Puerto Rico. And still, I was in Puerto Rico in January for coffee, and it's not recovered. We're back to resilience, right? How is this possible when that much agriculture is wiped out in a single day, right? So I could go on and on about the weather-related hazards in coffee and agriculture, but then there's also some of the human conflicts, right? Which, whether we name it as a genocide or a civil war or a war or a civil conflict, these also have a very serious impact, not just for coffee, but for all of agriculture, right? And so my first time in Africa was in 1994. I was in Kenya, but it was while the 94 genocide was happening in Rwanda. And that's a whole story all its own in terms of the relationship between coffee and that genocide. But right now, what's happening in Burundi, this is another big debate. Is that a genocide or not? So the coffee harvests are being impacted in Burundi right now, a neighboring country of Rwanda. And it's definitely impacting the coffee, the livelihoods, and of course, forced migration in the whole region. Okay, so to transition to some good news, who needs coffee? You all gonna raise your hands, right? Yeah, so how many times I hear people say, I need coffee, or I say, I need coffee, right? And we do, of course, right? We're dependent on it, right? But what I want to share with you is, of course, a different point of view, that as much as we need it in the global north and that we say we depend on it, we actually don't, right? It's actually a gift. And I know that's a very radical thing to say. Not really, if I want you to leave with one thing, it would be that idea, is that coffee is a gift that is provided to us because of the labor and the hands of so many women in the global south. Men also, but more women. And, we take it for granted, right? That this drink is just here at our beck and call anytime we want it to be. And in the global south, all of the world's coffee is, or let me reframe that, all of the world's coffee is produced by the global south, what the United Nations would determine as the least developed countries are almost all coffee-producing countries whose economies very, very heavily depend on if coffee is thriving and moving in the ways that they want it to Europe and to America. And so in coffee, we call this the coffee belt. So the Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn here, and it's literally a belt around the whole world where all of our coffee comes from. So does anyone know what are the two American coffee producing places? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Hawaii is the only state right now that produces coffee, and what's the other one? Yeah. So most of my work up to this point has concerned Africa. and mostly East Africa. If you look at the entire continent, it's really framed in East and West, with coffee as a core export in the East, and cacao, chocolate, as the core export in the West. So these two beans really thrive and drive these economies and the world trade. A lot of this started for me when I was a young girl, reading Out of Africa by Isak Dinesen. That was the pen name for Karen Blixen. And if you want to know more about that, I can tell you another time. But for this trip in July, I happened to arrive the very day that the African Union was descending upon Kigali for the first ever time that everyone was coming to Kigali for their summit. And it was such a thrill for me, not only to be in Rwanda for the first time, but to literally walk around this gorgeous city, Kigali, and see flags and signs everywhere, hanging like banners in hotel rooms that say, women's rights are human rights. Everywhere. And so people would ask me, are you here for the summit? And I would say no, but it's fortuitous that I'm here, right? Because it's exactly why I was there, was thinking about women and coffee. And another surprise was the money. So even on the Rwandan franc, there are coffee beans. It's such a key part. And President Kagame changed, through the bank, of course, they changed all the money a few years ago because when the country went from being French-speaking to English-speaking. So, this is new, actually, for them to put the coffee beans on the money. Okay. So, now I want to just share a couple stories with you, and this is really leading up to the heart here of what I wanted to share with you all today in terms of some things that I've learned as I've been traveling and what's inspired me. And a lot of my thinking on this is inspired by my own mother, who barely graduated from high school, but would always read and recite poetry to me as a young girl, took me to the library, and both my parents really sacrificed a lot for my education. So when I think about these women, as they're my teachers, and I think sometimes the rhetoric is we think as the North, we're empowering them. And I don't see it that way at all. I think they're inspiring me. And what I am wanting to do here is share some stories with you, because I think maybe you all won't get to Rwanda. But, through the stories and through the coffee, we can travel there together, right? So what you're seeing here is a coffee cooperative in the north of Rwanda, where it's a fair trade cooperative, and you're seeing a bunch of women who, again, they're physically by hand sorting out each coffee bean and putting the good ones in one pile and the bad ones in the other pile. And the good ones are going to go to specialty coffee, and that's why you pay $4 for a latte at a great Seattle cafe, right? And the bad ones are going to go to the commercial side of the trade, okay? Nothing will be wasted. They'll sell them both, but they'll get different prices. You're going to see so many of my pictures have women smiling with these huge, beautiful smiles. And this is not just a device of, me standing there saying, please smile. I mean, this is really what we saw over and over and over, and I continue to see is people smiling about the coffee and people dancing with literally singing coffee songs as we arrive over the coffee. And what they're singing is about how much they love the coffee. And as we come as Americans or Europeans, for this part, with this cooperative, I was part of a delegation, so we all went together. We come up in these two vans, and all these women in these gorgeous dresses are literally singing a coffee song to us, right? Which in translation means, we love our coffee, we want you to love our coffee, please buy our coffee, right? And we're saying, yes, we want to buy your coffee too, because we know that it is, giving you and your children livelihood, right? And a good life. in this, let me go back. So in this picture, all of these women are coffee farmers, okay? In this picture, you have some of the younger people who are dancers as part of we would think of as a dance troupe, but they wouldn't. And they, same thing, different cooperative. We drive up and they're dancing coffee songs for us. And part of why I love this and part of why I gave you an Ethiopian coffee bean as opposed to a Rwandan one is because, does anybody know the origin story of how coffee was discovered? Oh, you know it? Yeah.
Say it a little louder.
Oh, yeah, there were goats that were eating the coffee beans and then they were caffeinated and dancing.
Yeah, there was yeah. Exactly. A young herdsman in Ethiopia lost his goats. This is a terrible thing, right? If you're a young boy and lose your goats, you're going to be in big, big trouble. And he's looking, for where are they? And he finds them. The legend goes, right, that he sees them from afar, right, dancing and singing with joy for coffee. And they had partaken of the cherry, and supposedly the goats were dripping with the red juice, right, of the cherry. So yes, so this idea of the dancing and the singing for coffee, it's all part of it, right? Okay, so Copacabana Cooperative is really the one cooperative, and I have dozens and dozens of stories like this, but I highlighted this one to share with you all because of the theme of today, of waves of possibility and thinking about what we're all doing here in terms of mentorship and leadership and thinking about our futures. So Copacabana Cooperative was founded in 1998, so a few years after the genocide in 94. And it started with only 47 members. And I love this sign. So in Rwandan, the word for coffee is ikawa. So what you see here on this chart is actually, this is the order of where the coffee actually goes in terms of the processing, okay? And all great coffee is grown in very high altitudes. It takes hours and hours by van to get anywhere for the great coffee. And here's a washing station, which, just to share with you, is a really important reason why Rwanda is doing so well, is because the number of washing stations have increased so much. And so it becomes a gathering place for men and women to bring their cherries. And the coffee cherries literally go on a water slide through this washing station and through the processing and the fermentation. It is a fair trade cooperative. One of the things that we saw was that the electricity that existed was because of that fair trade premium. And they are trying to get their Rainforest Alliance certification. So this ditch was being dug by a bunch of the guys because that coffee cherry, once it's separated from the bean, can be used for fertilizer and a bunch of other things to provide more sustainability. So that's what that ditch will eventually be, is a way for that cherry to be used. So it started with 47 members, and now there are 775 members. Now, this is really an important story for you to imagine, because most Rwandan coffee farmers, of whom there are upwards 500,000, okay, only own 1 hectare of land. Now, I know we don't think in hectares, we think in acres, right? So an equivalent would be like 2.5 acres, okay? So most Rwandans have less than that, okay? And the women usually, well, it's different in Rwanda, but in East Africa, it's not always owned by the women. So that provides another challenge for women. So Copacabana is really a key example and a great, a shining light in terms of all these things that are going on in coffee. And one reason for that is because they have implemented this methodology, which is called Gender Action Learning System, GALS. And it's based on a model of participatory action system. And, most coffee farmers can't read and write. So when you think about how do you create a new vision for your life, it's not going to work to do it through writing as we might do it. So there are many great things about gals, but one of them is that it is a method that is using pictures for mostly women to be drawing what their dreams are. And there's all these different pictograms, if you think of it that way, that they can be modeled for how do you create a better life for yourself and for your children. So what you see here is a huge hall where our whole delegation came, and a lot of the coffee farmers and producers came that day as well, to listen to their cooperative's Gals champion, and her name is Teresa, and Teresa is in the yellow shirt with the headdress. And I know the picture is difficult to see, but what she's showing here is one example in the pictogram of a vision journey. And what this journey tries to illustrate is that we are reaching for the sun. And so as you are trying to reach and climb toward the sun, how are you going to get there, right? And so how are you going to draw that? Because you're going to have certain opportunities that are within you, and then you're going to have certain challenges. And the opportunities and the challenges together are something that you have to work on, right? And so there are both internal and external opportunities and internal and external challenges, okay? And so to the extent that you can overcome these, right, then you progress up this ladder towards the sun. And so this is just one of, there's maybe 8 different pictograms that women are drawing around the world. It's not just in coffee, but it's getting a lot of attention in coffee because it's such an effective way for women to draw their dreams and to think really for the first time that I can do that, right? I can actually draw this vision for my life and achieve it. And so what I want to show you here is that like she has here a picture of a cow. You know, cows are very, very important in Rwanda, so if you have a cow, you're rich. And if your cow gets sick, you know, you're in big trouble. So you have the plants and the cows. Over here are challenges, over here are the opportunities. And then what Gals teaches women is to break that down, to get to, this is the sun, and then to go through the different steps of how do you get to that journey. So in Rwanda right now, a lot of what is in the sun in these pictures is something related to a house. The idea of having your own house, and if you have a house, to maybe it's a mud hut, but then to have cement floors. And maybe if you have cement floors, to have electricity and running water and a toilet that is around the corner that's separate, right? And so a lot of the pictures show things that have to do with the house, and a lot of the pictures have to do with having more animals and then having more coffee, right? And I was trying to I have this really great 2-minute video of Teresa talking in translation with Giselle, and I couldn't get it to work. So maybe, I don't know if we can try to get to work later. But I mean, she talks about that the reason why she's able to be on this vision journey to the sun is because of the coffee and because of the cooperative. It's the only way for all these smallholder farmers to come together in these cooperative groups. They can't compete on the global market otherwise. And they could never have a washing station alone, right? You have to have that collectively. The other thing that's really special about Gals is it's not just about your individual vision to the sun. It's also about your community vision. And this is partly why Teresa is the Gals champion. And so she was chosen to speak to all of us this day. She spoke for maybe an hour and a half, just her, detailing all the aspects of her vision and as well the community vision, because you can't do it alone in a coffee community. And so to the extent that, you know, your community is thriving, you're also thriving as well. And so you see on the vision journey, this one is the community one where it's more detailed because she's embodying so many other people's journeys and visions as well. So we went to farmer school, and it was wonderful because we all got to sit in the coffee trees and the banana trees and listen to some other women share their visions with us, especially their budgets. And it is always amazing to me when I hear the impact of gals, how honest these women are about, I make this much money, and I want to make this much money, and this is how many coffee trees I need to get there, and this is how many more cows I need to get there, right? And this is how I'm going to do it. And it's all laid out there on their picture, right? And they have the budget. It's perfectly represented, right? And so this is what, again, I know you're far away, but just to give you the idea, right, is that we're traipsing through the coffee trees with all these big pictures, and we're sitting there listening to her in her book. Just to leave Rwanda for 1 minute, I wanted to introduce you to Grace, who is here. And this is Annette. So I'm going to show you just a couple pictures of what Grace was sharing with me when I was in Uganda last year. And Annette is the community organizer who is working with all these different women on their community vision. This is a coffee cooperative in the far, far western hills of Uganda on the border of the DRC. And so here we are. Grace, you can see how thick that book is, right? Every single page of that book is filled with her vision. And half of it is her budget and how she's going to get there. And we sat there maybe for an hour and a half as she's detailing this. She's so proud. And I kept saying, thank you for being here. Like, it's, do you have time? She's like, no, it's like this great honor, right? That she can't believe we want to hear about it. And I said, yeah, it's great. I'll sit here all day, right? And then that's Eric who was translating for me. And this gives you just one page of how the budget kind of works. So it's, you have what you have, what you want, what the challenges are, and then along the way, how you're going to get there. And so, you see a lot of the coffee beans and coffee cherries here. My last woman to tell you about is named Tasania. And she, now I'm back to Rwanda. She's the mother of 12 children. I should have said Grace is the mother of 8 children. And the house that Grace has is all because of the coffee. So Tasania is standing here sharing her story with us. She's the mother of 12 children whose ages right now range from 15 to 40. And 3 of her children have died, so right now she has 9. She was not a coffee farmer before the genocide, but then joined this cooperative after. And it was a really beautiful and very moving story. All of them are, but hers really moved me so much because she just kept saying, I never thought I could earn money for myself. Her husband died in the genocide, so she was a widow. She had no one. And all these women came together as a community for the coffee, have rebuilt trust, which was lacking, right? And the coffee and the coffee washing stations have been a huge part of the story of why this is possible. And now Tasania is dreaming of her younger children now being able to go to the university because the coffee is doing so well. Just to give you a ballpark, so this cooperative earned $12,000, the equivalent of somewhere $12,000 US last year, which is huge for Rwanda. So why do I love coffee? It makes us all so happy, right? But it's really about the people. And the stories that I've shared with you are all stories that I've asked these women if I can share their stories, and they say, yes, please tell my story, share my story, and tell the women in America to buy our coffee, right? So now we're coming full circle. What is sustainability and what is resilience, right? And what we see from these stories are many things, but just to summarize a couple, is it's so many different hands coming together, right, to hold up the earth, to hold up each other. And it's women coming together. It's resilient communities, right, of people coming together in community for a shared goal and a shared purpose. We have these beautiful 17 goals called the Sustainable Development Goals. And every single one of these, if we can address this in the coffee industry, there will be movement forward. We didn't talk about water, but water is so key to the sustainability and the future of coffee. In these regions, it takes so much water. Women are carrying water in these huge jugs that if I had one here, all of us couldn't even pick it up probably for a minute or two, except Dave or Brian could maybe do it for 5 minutes, but it's, they carry them on their heads and they walk up these hills, and it's very hard to get a great spring of water for the washing stations. So, this is where I go back to this idea of, our coffee is a gift. And it might be an unlikely person for me to end with the Pope, Francis, but I do so because last year he did something quite astonishing for any Pope, which was that when he published his encyclical letter, he focused it on what he calls our common home, Earth. And the whole encyclical focuses on climate change and what it means to have a sustainable and resilient future. He doesn't mention coffee, but agriculture is huge as a part of it, right? And so, just to end with this thought of creation is not a property which we can rule over at will, or even less is the property of only a few. Creation is a gift. It is a wonderful gift that God has given us so that we care for it and we use it for the benefit of all, always with great respect and gratitude. So that's how I see coffee. That's the world in my cup that I see, and I hope that this has inspired you to maybe think a little bit differently about your coffee, but also about all the women's hands around the world who make it possible. Do you want to restate questions?
We're going to, for our video, and I'm going to do that, they need us to repeat the questions versus us try to run microphones. So will you help me again with your question? And then her voice is going, so I'm kind of, trying to channel Erica right at the moment. So the question is about Haiti and its position in the coffee business, and will it ever be able to recover from, okay.
Have you been to Haiti? I'm going in December. Well, I hope we can keep in touch and you can tell me. I haven't been to Haiti yet, but it is a coffee producing country. Of course, its neighbor is also a big coffee producing country. And, the thing, someone is going to ask me, what do I look for when I buy my coffee, right? So I could kind of do this through the back door and say, what you want is single origin. So when you're looking at a bag of coffee, and unfortunately I don't have an example here, but you want a bag of beans that's going to say a place that's specific. And, I can't think of the last time I saw a single origin Haitian bag of coffee. And so a lot of times, a lot of these beans get traded and they become parts of blends. So we don't see the name of the country there. But it's a source of great, great pride, and this is a huge effort in Rwanda right now. They want the name Rwanda on the bags. They want to say where in the country those beans come from, because it's such a source of pride in their identity, in their legacy, in their land. They want you to know this is where it's from. Right. Yeah. Great question.
Another question.
With that in mind, it seems like you're going to say yes. Is it more beneficial to the farmers if you buy a single origin coffee? I would imagine it would be. Can you explain why that is?
Sure. Yeah. Without getting too buried in the economics of it, the short answer is because most of the times, especially in Seattle, because there's so many great places to buy coffee here, when you're buying a single origin, you're purchasing it from a cafe or from a roaster who is trading more directly with that cooperative or that farm than if you don't see that single origin. Does that make sense? And so there's actually different price points that are in effect depending on if you see that label Fair Trade USA or Fair Trade International. That's good. There are other good ones too, right? But there's a premium that is part of that story of what's going back then to the cooperative. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sometimes if you're lucky, you'll even get little stories on a bag of beans, and those are great. If you see those, you're dealing with somebody who really cares about the story of the beans and the farmers.
Other questions?
So, Erica, climate change is impacting agriculture across the globe.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering at the cooperative level if there are discussions or strategies or what is happening, or is there anything happening at that to plan for the impacts of climate change, especially when we're talking about water, which is a huge, as you said earlier, component that is critically important, and yet water supplies around the globe are becoming a big topic. So I'm just kind of curious to know at that level if there is cognizant planning going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question and a complicated one, so thanks for asking it. One of the things I love about coffee is it's very complex, and the answer so much of the time, and this is the genuine answer, I'm not just deflecting, is it depends. And it doesn't just depend on the country, because even within a country, the coffee story is very diverse. Fundamentally, the answer is yes. I mean, especially as the specialty coffee industry in this third, fourth wave of coffee, it's absolutely a discussion. I'm continually impressed by the depth of the discussion and the research that's happening, especially in terms of the science. And I'm not a scientist, but I'm at least paying attention to it in terms of literally resilient beans. What will it take for this coffee bean and this varietal to thrive in different climates at different altitudes? So all the coffee that we drink, I would say 99% of the coffee all of us in this room drink is from Arabica beans. And that needs a high altitude, which makes it even more complicated, especially in terms of the water. So this last year at one of the cooperatives that I was at in Rwanda, it was a huge problem because the rain hadn't come when it is usually supposed to. And that's very common, that if the rain comes too early or too late, it really impacts the quality and the way the cherries flourish and grow. Also, if there's too much water at certain times, which is also sometimes because of climate change, that's a huge problem too. So yeah, this whole water question is a big one, and there's a lot of great work being done.
Do we have folks out here in the sunroom, and so is there any questions from the sunroom folks? All right. So we have more here. I will go here, and then we'll go here. Does government corruption in the African countries that you've been to impact? I'm guessing the answer is probably yes, and if so, how?
So, if you look at the coffee map, there are a lot of corrupt governments in coffee-producing countries. So, I'll be happy to talk to you about this after if you want a better answer. What I will say, and this is true, is I was continually impressed by how intentional the Rwandan government right now is being in terms of their policies and making sure that it's actually reaching even the tiniest of the small farmers. And their gender policy is real. I mean, over and over, women were talking about the ways in which things are better now, not just in coffee, but in general. So yeah, it was a, you know, it was a surprise to me in some ways, but talk about resilience, right, for Rwanda to come from 1994 to now.
So if we do want to kind of support the cooperatives, what's the best sources, or what are some of the sources of information we can use in the future when we go about making decisions?
Yeah, that's a great question. These are all such great questions. You know, I know it's a big controversy in terms of the labels. You know, there's so many labels on all our food products now. I think it's actually a great place to start is, if you're curious, is, you know, look at the Fair Trade USA website and read and look at their annual report and see what you think about what they're doing in coffee and other products. I'm a big supporter of it because I've seen it firsthand, but I know everybody doesn't get to do that, right? I'm also a big supporter of Rainforest Alliance. They're very focused, of course, on the rainforest environmental piece as well, which is great. In terms of a resource that you could just go to, there's a Specialty Coffee Association of America, which is more than you probably ever wanted to know about coffee. But, you know, that would be at least a great place for you to start. But really, I would say just kind of for the general, I'm assuming a lot of you are just general consumers of coffee, right? I would say look for that bag that has a specific place that's beyond just Kenya, you know, where it says Kenya and then it names a location and says something about, sometimes you'll even get altitude, you know, sometimes you'll get something about, is it naturally processed, or is it processed by the sun, or is it processed through water? You know, you don't even need to know what all that means, right? But just the fact that they're identifying that means that they are giving great care both to quality of the bean and the livelihoods of their farmers. So maybe one more.
One more. I have a question, and that is the association of, as women have been supported in Rwanda and other countries in becoming farmers and stabilizing incomes, etc. What has been the outcome for the community and the greater state as far as perhaps stability and rise in education, etc.?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think what we always see, right, in the data is that when women receive a better price for a product, whether it's coffee or anything else, that transcends to a wider net. And, you know, unfortunately, that isn't always the case in farmer families. If the money is going to the husband, that doesn't always translate where the woman and the children reap the benefit, you know, of that price point. So yeah, so I mean, it's definitely. I think the UN had a report last year where they said that, you know, if you give women the money, it will serve, you know, the community in stronger ways. And I'm sorry I don't have that to quote intelligently for you, but just to summarize that, yeah, I mean, that's definitely what I've seen to be true. And all my pictures, as you see, I mean, they're mostly women. There's one pictogram in the GALS method that is called a gender balance tree. And I always wish that couples in the U.S., this should be like forced, not forced, right? But it should be part of, yeah, marital, right, premarital training, right, to do a gender balanced tree. And it's literally, you draw a tree and you think about the roots and who's doing what to make the roots strong, and then how that tree grows, and then who's benefiting from the branches, and it's very deliberate in the sense of, we are sharing a household together. It's not just about just the woman. It's about coming together as a couple, for the usually 4 or more children in a family, to say, how do we make a better life all together? So that gender balance tree is usually first taught by a woman teacher to the women, but then she'll go back to her husband and they'll do it together. So it's a powerful tool.
I like it. I think it should be mandatory.
Yeah. So last question? Okay, yes.
I know in some parts of the world, the women have gone together like a bank, where you can borrow so much money that you later pay back from the proceeds, like of a couple of chickens or whatever. Are the co-ops doing that too, so the women can go out and buy more coffee land or some other processing thing that they need?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, it depends. It depends on what the trade model is, but yeah, that's definitely happening. At Copacabana, which I showed you some pictures of, they actually have some incentive programs where there are different products that women can get for a certain amount of cherries that are picked, that are ripe and perfect, right? So yeah, that's part of the pooling the resources together. An individually smallholder coffee farmers couldn't buy electricity for their washing station alone, but together they pool it through those community premiums, and so that's how they're able to thrive together.